Filmmaking is, well, it's pretty hard. There's no two ways about it. But when it comes to franchise filmmaking, not all franchises are quite so lucky though. There are certainly those big budget failures that did at least try. These movies, meanwhile, were fundamentally misguided from a conceptual level upwards. And it's honestly amazing they passed through so many checks and balances unscathed before being greenlit and released. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 8 movies that didn't understand what the fans wanted. Number 8, X-Men The Last Stand. X-Men The Last Stand may not quite be the worst X-Men movie ever. That honor surely goes to X-Men Origins Wolverine for now. But it is the most disappointing, given the enormous potential of adapting the Dark Phoenix saga to the big screen with this cast. Where to even begin with what it got wrong? But the film's fundamental issues largely stem from its misguided script. Some of the more widely loathed moments include Cyclops getting an anticlimactic off-screen death, Mystique losing her powers, Vinnie Jones playing the wisecracking Juggernaut, and an unintentionally comical climax where Magneto uses his metal manipulation powers to move the Golden Gate Bridge. All that in one movie, my head hurts. And that's not to forget the numerous new characters given little to do, and the fact that the Phoenix herself was a massively damp squib, again getting little to do until the tail end of the film. Oh, and there's that daft post-credits scene where Charles Xavier's death is quickly nullified too, robbing it of any impact it might have had. Worse than all this though, Simon Kinberg, who co-wrote The Last Stand, was incredulously given a second chance to adapt the Dark Phoenix saga in the conclusion to the Fox mainline X-Men saga. Yep, and that went about as well as you'd expect. Number 7, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. The belated 4th entry into the Indiana Jones franchise was hugely anticipated by fans, and despite netting both solid critical acclaim and a mighty $786.6 million worldwide, the fan base was largely left crestfallen. It's all downhill from that opening shot with the CGI prairie dog, honestly. Though a surprisingly spry Harrison Ford was clearly game for another go-around, and Steven Spielberg's direction turned out fine, Indy 4 is just jam-packed with ill-advised ideas, both off-puttingly goofy and straight-up inane. Hot off his success in Transformers, Shia LaBeouf was cast as Indy's obnoxious son, Mutt, with the clear intent that he might take over the Indy mantle in the future. Except LaBeouf's performance was more grating than charming, and in addition to audiences largely rejecting him, Tarzan swing and all, LaBeouf himself even trashed the film during its press tour. In what was a solid call for all involved, LaBeouf was then quietly fired from the franchise. Elsewhere, there's the infamous, much maligned sequence in which Indy survives an atomic bomb blast by hiding in a fridge, and a plot centered around extraterrestrials that feels a little too silly even for the balmy standards of this franchise. Though hyperbole has certainly fed some of the fan disdain for the movie, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was ultimately a workmanlike sequel, patently unsure of how to update Indy for a new generation. The obvious answer was maybe don't. But Disney still tried again in 2023 with The Dial of Destiny, a movie that also experienced a bit of a, let's say, mixed reception when it rode into cinemas. Number 6, Alien Covenant. Following the divisive response to Prometheus, Ridley Scott reshaped the planned Prometheus sequel into a more direct alien-centric film. And so, Alien Covenant quickly bombed the engineers out of the franchise, dished up another fleet of idiotic human characters, needlessly killed Elizabeth Shaw off-screen, over-explained the origins of the xenomorph, and served up a few dodgy CGI Xenos in the third act too. I will never forget those things. To be honest, the only particularly interesting thing that Covenant gave fans was 2 Michael Fassbenders for the price of 1. The vast majority of the fan base wanted to see a sequel where Shaw, the only truly likable character from Prometheus, headed to the engineer homeworld to confront them for why they wished to destroy the life that they had created. But that's not really what they got in the end, as Scott clearly had other ideas. The great Scott will always do what he wants though, folks, and that's why he's the icon that he is. And speaking of doing what he wants, he's currently developing another another new Alien movie too. One that he's teased could perhaps be a long-awaited sequel to Covenant. Number 5, World War Z. World War Z ended up scoring bafflingly decent reviews from critics, and a thoroughly undeserved $540 million worldwide. Because Brad Pitt plus zombies is a swing that just can't miss apparently. Even before we go into the film's notoriously troubled production, many fans were immediately upset that it decided to adapt Max Brooks' source novel in name only, effectively using the name branding to tell a depressingly generic zombie apocalypse tale. Between its lame characters, occasional unintentional hilarity, and cynically neutered PG-13 rating, it was a film broad, simplistic, and forgettable in every way that Brooks' novel just wasn't. The film's budget ballooned in post-production when a new ending was shot, after Paramount executives felt that the more politically charged original finale, with Pitt fighting his way through zombies in Russia, would hurt its international box office. For both fans of the book and those who just love grisly zombie movies, World War Z was a rare film that appeared to show active contempt for its target demographic. But it earned all the money in the end, so Paramount likely did not give a damn. Number 4, Batman and Robin. Batman Forever may not have been a totally successful first and only outing as Batman for Val Kilmer, but it at least oozed eye-popping style and committed confidently to some of its zanier choices. Joel Schumacher returned to direct the follow-up Batman and Robin, and seemingly believing the previous film to be a little too restrained, he decided to dial up the camp, crack up the neon to bull-busting levels, and chase the toy merch gravy train all the way to the bank. George Clooney's Batman was bafflingly charmless. Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy was too camp for her own good. Bane was reduced to a mute grunt, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze sacrificed genuine menace for groan-worthy silliness. On the plus side though, Batman and Robin miscalculated its audience enough that it prompted Warner Brothers to push the needle in the total opposite direction for Christopher Nolan's 2005 reboot Batman Begins. And the rest is history. Marvelous, iconic history. Number 3, The Predator. Fans were understandably ecstatic when Shane Black was announced as both writer and director of a new Predator reboot sequel, which Fox hoped would be the first entry into a new blockbuster franchise. With Black fresh off the success of Iron Man 3 and his penchant for pithy dialogue firmly reinforced, this really felt like a film that could not miss, on paper at least. Sadly, the end result lacks almost all of Black's personality as a filmmaker, bar a few inspired one-liners, suggesting that the production ultimately ran away from him. But as much as one wants to criticize the studio, who forced Black into third-act reshoots after disastrous test screenings, the movie as a whole just feels like a student trying to copy Black's style than an actual Black original itself. From the awful jokes about Tourette's to a woefully misguided subplot about autism, and a cringe-worthy CGI Predator that feels like a studio-mandated addition, it never becomes more than a cynical box-ticking exercise. This is no truer than in its hysterically awful finale, which unleashes an Iron Man-inspired Predator killer suit while teasing the genesis of a new cinematic universe. Because everyone needs a cinematic universe now, don't they? All fans wanted was some likable characters, some gory violence, and the return of the iconic titular antagonist. That's it. Number 2, Judge Dredd. Judge Dredd is a comic book character that fans had been gagging to see adapted to the big screen for the better part of 2 decades. And with the right material and director, Sylvester Stallone actually could have been a pretty great Dredd, but Sly's ego essentially sabotaged the project from the outset, with the action star refusing to keep his moneymaker obscured beneath the anti-hero's iconic helmet, presumably hoping that his mug might help sell the $90 million tentpole to audiences. Spoiler, it did not. The film's tone is all over the place, veering from the stylized grimness of the source material to B-movie hokum, with some grating comic relief from Rob Schneider for good measure. Between all this, a disappointingly sterile use of its R rating and a cackle-worthy performance from Stallone, it's a superficial, unintentional pleasure at the very most. Thankfully though, Carl Urban's 2012 reboot basically did everything right that this movie didn't, especially keeping Dredd's face obscured, even if it also bombed at the box office. Oh, poor Dredd. And number 1, Star Wars Episode Episode 1 The Phantom Menace. As divisive as Star Wars The Last Jedi was, critics actually lovingly embraced it, and a lot of fans will proudly bang the drum for it, which is more than can be said for Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace. Despite the unprecedented level of anticipation for the long-awaited prequel, fans were clued in right away that something was amiss, with the film's opening crawl discussing the taxation of trade routes. And though The Phantom Menace was an undeniable technical achievement in its own right, its overt reliance on digital filmmaking techniques set an awkward precedent for the entire prequel trilogy, ensuring that these films would age far worse than the original trilogy. That's not to forget the film's myriad other issues, or the cringeworthy dialogue totally wasting Darth Maul, many not being the biggest Jar Jar Binks fans early on, and needlessly explaining the origins of the Force. Fans would have honestly just settled for a nostalgic retread of A New Hope, which is exactly what they eventually got with The Force Awakens 16 years later. Instead, without any collaborators keen or able to veto his nuttier ideas, George Lucas was given free rein to do whatever the hell he wanted. Now, I will say that I actually did love this movie as a youngster, and it will always have a place in my heart. But yeah, a lot of fans out there definitely were not happy about this when it was released.